thank you very much, and to all of you for coming here this evening. It's terrific to have you here in this amazing space. As James said, my name is Troy Forrest. I run a business called Strategy Road. You can read the blurb in the documents there. Can I echo James's comments and add my thanks certainly to our panelists here tonight, Martin, Steven, Bruce and Nikki, and also to our generous sponsors and hosts this evening, Onda Lifestyle, Concierge, Chatham Capital Exchange and Stellan Capital, with a very fancy pop-up banner over there. George, James, David and your teams, thank you so much for putting on what is a really important conversation in what is a terrific space, right? So our generous hosts here tonight and wonderful hospitable hosts at the Lion Hotel, it's a terrific space to have a critically important business leadership conversation at a critical time. As James said, you know, we are business leaders and a community of business leaders rolling our wagons out of a pretty weird and challenging year and right into another one, which will not have fewer challenges potentially. They might evolve, they might be a little bit different, but we are not out of the woods. And so it makes this conversation, this next discussion, all the more important. As I said, we're very fortunate to be joined by 4 exemplary South Australian business leaders on our panel. I'm no yarn event, I've got to tell you, and so the questions won't be too probing, but I'm hoping we can extract some really valuable insights from all of your diverse and deep experiences in leading businesses through 2020 and what you're thinking about and planning for 2021, which I think will have immense value to this crowd. So let's kick it off then, and Mark, as our most generous host, perhaps I can reciprocate your generosity with the gift of putting you out of your misery up first. Can I first congratulate you, Martin, and your team on, for those of you who aren't aware, Martin's facilities, 2KW and Paloma, took out a couple of pretty impressive gongs at the AHA Awards the other week, Best Restaurant and Best Small Bar, so congratulations to you. Fantastic recognition of amazing venues, and I hope you and your team celebrate it suitably. It is fair to say, though, that 2020 wasn't particularly celebratory for a whole lot of organisations in the hospitality space in this state. Now, we are here tonight to talk about thriving in business, but to do that, you've first got to survive. You've got to get through. So when you look back on the year that just was, Martin, and everything that COVID threw at pubs and restaurants in this state, what can you pull out of it? What did you learn about survival in business?
Yeah, thanks Troy. Well, if I cast my mind back to March last year, I mean, you think about generational pubs that have been trading every day of the year for 150 years, and suddenly someone says, you have to shut the doors. I mean, I never thought that I would actually see that. So you take a step back, you take a big breath, you think, okay, what's next? And I think where I landed, first of all, in those early days was, it made me realise how important your relationships are. Obviously, you think about the people that are around you, your staff, in a business sense, your staff, your suppliers, your financiers, and the family business, family too. So they were the initial things. That might have been a bit of almost a shock reaction in a way. But then as time got on, really I think then we sat out we went through the shutdown, then we had to get ready to reopen. We had lots of restrictions, particularly in the early days. Pubs were a bit like the bellwether for the whole thing. When are the pubs going to open? That was always the big thing. When are the pubs going to reopen? It was kind of like the signal to where we're coming out the other end. And now I think to sort of get through that, I think it was a matter of it was a great learning curve, because I think we just questioned everything. I think we questioned everything we did. We had to look at the business from top to bottom. Why we do that, how we do that, when we do that. Should we be doing that instead? And I think that were probably the 2 big takeouts for me.
Yeah, okay. Nikki, it's a great segue to you because not only do you have a slightly unique sort of vantage point on the business ecosystem in South Australia, I'll read this so I get it right, Chair of Business SA, the Adelaide Economic Development Agency and the State Government's Events Advisory Group, but of course you're also a hospitality business owner yourself, the wonderful star of Greece Cafe down at restaurants, I should say, Paul Lunga. So if you cast your eyes over that ecosystem of businesses which normal trade was disrupted pretty badly. What can you say about the range of impacts that COVID had? And what do you think some of the businesses that are sitting here in February 2021 in that space, feeling a bit bruised, but maybe with a little bit of confidence and maybe positioned a little bit better, what are they doing differently to others?
Sure, that's fairly broad, and your time starts now. So the 23rd of March last year, I woke up with probably the biggest non-alcohol induced hangover ever. Like Marty said, we were, in the tourism and hospitality industry, we were hit the hardest, and it was a little while before takeaway could kind of get back up and running. Probably one of my greatest personal challenges was the thought of having to work from home with my husband for 6 weeks. I'm sure many people can relate to that. Zoom's been terrific. We've been able to do those things, but what we saw, the cost of the lockdown, AHA recently commissioned a study of the second lockdown. So when we got through that first lockdown, and I think it's probably fair to say we weren't really scarred by that. It was kind of hard at the time, but then when you look at what other states have had to go through, particularly Victoria, we were pretty unharmed. Now, this is a business that lost a significant turnover, so I think I've sort of got permission to say that, like Marty, but we weren't as harmed as other industry sectors and other states as they were. When the second lockdown came for 3 days, that 3 days had a very, very, very long tail. And I'm getting some nods. I think if you look at the hospitality industry, they lost $100 million in turnover, so restaurants, pubs and cafes, 12,500 jobs, between $5 and $10 million of spoilage of goods. So these hard and tough and fast lockdowns cannot continue. They probably will, because we've got elections coming up. Western Australia, we've got South Australia, and then there'll be a federal election in the next sort of 12 to 14 months. So that's really challenging for business if that's what's going to happen. If there's 2 or 3 cases, then that is going to be challenging. What I'm absolutely encouraged about, Business SA do a survey of business expectations, our SOAP survey. At the end of September quarter, it was the biggest increase in confidence in a 20-year history. It went up from 32 points to some 95 points. The end December quarter, it's not quite released yet, so I can't say too much, but it's still really, really encouraging that there is a lot of confidence out there in the market. So there are businesses that are thriving. There's no doubt there are some industries that are doing particularly well. If you're in construction, no one can get a trade. So I think there are a couple of 2-speed economy. The only one quick point I want to touch on is that regional's doing really well. Metropolitan in many areas is doing pretty well, but the city and the CBD, parts of Adelaide, the city CBD with my other hat on, is still really challenged. And that's still some government-imposed work from home policy and still some businesses that are having that. So 10,000 people who are not in the city grabbing a cup of coffee, a meal at 2kW, or doing a little shopping, that is still an impact and still something that we've really got to push to get back, because there's no reason not to be in the city and getting out about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done, and thank you. And very pleasing that there is some bullishness, albeit quite fragmented and all over the place. Stephen, it's probably a good throw over to you, where in this discombobulating word, I think that's the word that my daughter's told me I should be using in this concept, discombobulating. I can't spell it, but I can say it. Stephen, if pubs and restaurants had some pretty tough challenges in 2020, I'll hold my beer a moment and meet the wine industry. It's a competitive space at the best of times. Throw into that COVID venue closures, cellar door closures, but also fire, drought, and now a little difference of opinion with our neighbours to the north and the impact on the export market that's having. As Managing Director of the Randall Group in Seppeltsfield, a major wine producer and exporter in this state, how did the year test you? What did it teach you? You get a 3-part question here. And are there any silver linings that you can kind of see coming from this?
Well, firstly, I was mostly upset that pubs were closed. That's good day everyone. It was an eventful year. There was a couple of winos I noticed in the house. I said Sean Edwards from Curie Hill. It was an heck of a year. In fact, probably the Annis Horribilis of 2020 started in late 2019. In that we had the hottest and driest summer on record. It was followed by bushfires and smoke taint for a lot of the industry. And that led to a vintage that was very short because there weren't too many grapes. That was the leanest in 40 or 50 years, judging by the commentary of most of the veterans of the game. So it was pretty demanding. For us, we also lost a key operative in China at age 47. It's a completely separate story, but he just died suddenly and we lost our key person in China. It's quickly followed, as you say, by COVID, as everyone knows. By March 21, so the door was shut, everything was turning the food there, and the standard stack moving down. And then the China one hit. November 27th, they closed the curtain on all exports to China. I thought it was pretty normal coming from the AFL, because you have the odd incident along the way. I thought this was all very normal, but those in the industry, and I'm sure that Sean will be the same, said it's a pretty crazy year. Crazy demanding, crazy tough in every which way. So much so that Steven Trigg, our chief winemaker, has got a sense of humour. So being a great winemaker, as Nikki knows, others know, he made a run of 50 dozen beautiful Grenache, about 65 or 70 bucks, and called it after 2020 Costa, which I thought was actually a very good name for a wine. Do you know what? I'm only 2 years in the industry, and I was talking to Troy about this earlier, is that I've been really impressed with the industry in terms of its ability to plan and the expertise that prevails throughout is really impressive. It's quite a collaborative note to the industry as well. But having been involved in a lot of strategic planning over the years, it's just interesting that whilst there's good plans in place, I don't think anybody ever really thought about what if China shut off completely? What if it actually just shut? When I say that, it might have been a thought process in a strategic planning session, but actually fleshing that out as part of the planning process of what would we do? But what ifs? In footy you call it what ifs, it's immediately before you play. What if this happens? What if that happens? Talking to Warren, who's made 39 trips to China in something like 10 years to get some really nice business up here. Besides being grossly disappointed by the state of play and feeling as though it's much wasted, but a lot of effort for not much money, he says, we thought we might have a diminishment in China, but we never really considered that it would just shut its doors like this. So a bit the same way as pub going might not have expected to be closed, same sort of deal. And I think the learning always is in the planning is what if. Because this year, if anything has taught us, and there's no rocket science, there's a lot of crazy stuff that happen, and there's still some uncertainty in the wine industry, in the finance sector, etc. What if? And that's, for me, is we're working hard at a whole bunch of what ifs.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think it's as relevant to any industry. Best analyses are going a little deeper in strategy sessions than I've ever seen them going before. Bruce, I might throw to you if I can. As well as being a genuine champion of the game, you're the current director of football at Adelaide United Football Club. And you and the club have also gone through a year where, for the most part, sport got sadder and spun on the bench. And so, no doubt, revenue challenges from reduced ticket sales, sponsors having their budgets tightened, merchandise sales pressures, and you simply didn't have a product to put on the pitch. So, how did 2020 then shift your and the football club's thinking about your business, about how you engage with your target market? What sort of evolutions were you kind of forced to make?
Yeah, look, we had an exceptionally difficult year, like everyone in this room. I think what's unique to our game, being a global game, is our ability to sell players. So we were fortunate last season that we had a very good squad and arguably 5 or 6 assets, if you want to call them that had a market value that could then be unsold. So we were a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of the sustainability of the business. Football is soccer, football, whatever you want to call it, it's different to AFL, it's different to rugby league. in terms of the revenue models. You know, we don't have massive TV rights deals that can essentially fund the game, right? So our chairman, when he bought the club, and that's the other part, it's owned by individuals. Clubs are owned by individuals. So you're always, as an employee, you're always beholden to the appetite of an individual to want to lose money, which is not fine. because these club owners, they're very wealthy, you know, $1 or $2 billion losses to them is immaterial. But when the world is shut down and their core business isn't making enough money, then why should I lose $1 or $2 billion to play them? That yes, I'm passionate about, but it's not core to my industry. So, you know, it was a very nervous time. The football teams, generally young men, younger than 30, mortgages, young families, and they're in a precarious sort of workplace all the time anyway. You can get injured, you know, you might not get recontracted or whatever. So, being a little bit ahead of the curve, we actually looked at selling some players. And I don't see all the finances, but I must say the football department did a good job in generating about $1.5 million in player sales. Now, it was a difficult time to sell players because they needed an exemption just to leave the country in the first place. The whole world shut down, so we sold the player to the UK, we sold the player to an MLS club in the United States, the player went to Denmark. So these countries also are struggling. So for me, I'm sort of the middleman. I'm sort of caught between the players whose dream is to play in Europe. So they're always wanting to go overseas, they're ambitious. And between a chairman who wants king's ransom for all his assets. You know, so, and the club I'm negotiating. But the ability, I think, to sell players, I don't say it kept the club afloat, but it significantly improved our financial position as opposed to if those players weren't able to be sold, you know, there's 1.5 million that goes straight to the ready.
Terrific, thank you. Stephen, I'm a Carlton supporter. I wish we'd sell a few more players over the years, I've got to tell you, but I'll leave that there. Nikki, as nice as it would be here to sit here thinking, phew, that's all over, the reality, of course, is quite different. And as James said a moment ago, what's happening in Victoria this week reminds us that what we're navigating will remain uncertain for a period of time. How do you think businesses in this state need to be thinking about, and maybe even rethinking their business models about how they go about, you know, developing and engaging profitable customer groups in a time when it's going to remain foggy for a while?
Look, I think the reality is we're going to be in a 1 or 2 square metre for the better part of this year, and even I think the likelihood is that there will be a new act that's developed to take us from the Emergency Act into a new act that will allow for the government to do things like lockdowns, QR codes, various other things. And I think while we're under the Emergency Act, we will see this 1 or 2 square metre. Now, in our industry, and in many industries, so not just tourism and hospitality, you know, in fitness and gyms, etc. For many of them, it's not 70%. Our restaurant is sitting at 70% capacity. Marty, you're probably all over. There are many sitting at 50%.
Well, these rules affect. If you have a big footprint, it's not so bad. If you have a small footprint, it's very bad.
So think of a small restaurant like Show that's opened on Kimberley Road. Because they built their kitchen in there, which was to have all of this fabulous theatre, that's their footprint. They can't have anyone dining there, so they're sitting at 50%. So many businesses at the moment are still sitting at only 50%. So you've got to be innovative, and you have to change things. And I don't think, you know, we certainly move very, very swiftly, like many other restaurants, to go to double sittings. I'd like to think that we'll never ever change that. Anybody in hospitality will probably say that, but that'll be in a way the consumers might sort of buck that. We also then move to do things like on a weekend, say what's a minimum of 2 courses. Now, I can tell you I've fielded conversations with people that just say, I don't want to pay for 2 courses. And I've was talking to somebody earlier about my response, which is rather more polite than it used to be. I think some of these profile positions I'm now having is sort of keeping me a little bit more politically correct. But you have to change and innovate. So we've made these decisions, and if I talk just about our business, over summer, which is our busiest time, that's when we're there to make money, our restaurant made the same, turned over the same in the restaurant as the same period last year. I was pumped about that, absolutely pumped. The kiosk, which is the more casual dining, because people were travelling more regionally, that was up. And so we then had to work out ways to sort of innovate and cope with those. So you can't sit back, you've got to be disruptive, you have to just look back there. You cannot just sit back and say, well, the government's closed the borders, therefore I'm affected, my business is stuffed, if you don't give me a handout, what's going to happen? So I'll give you the big tip, in March, JobKeeper will end the way it is. There will be targeted stimulus for industries that are still effective, and the job seeker bonus is likely to end. There's an upside there, because I don't know if anybody's experiencing skills shortages, because people are staying at home on their couch because they're getting a hell of a lot of money. And we don't have the skill migration, so that's a problem. So I think there'll be an upside. But what the attitude of those people coming back off the couch with a reduced job seeker will remain to be seen.
Okay. Stephen, I might ask you the same question, but with your hat on as chair of Onda Financial Concierge, and thinking about the finance sector, rethinking, reimagining, business models of service provision, mechanisms. Where does your mind go to there? What do you think organisational leaders need to be considering in this different world?
So for those who don't know, Onda is a great little company in Adelaide, led by George Wilson and Lisa. George is the founder. It started life, that's how I came to be involved, because I needed a bit of help, actually, big to say, river gun, needed a bit of help, just not getting to my personal. I know my own work budget back to front, but my own scenarios, suffering here, the bills aren't getting paid on time, and start to become a cause of an argument between myself and my wife. And Victor and I actually owned a property, and we always good with that, but actually with someone look after the pain and paying bills to try and find a better price. That's my best way of describing Onda. And Onda started life just like that, with a really great, secure vault behind it, that consolidated and aggregated all of the information in one spot, and you can just go to the bank, I'll take that. So that's fine, but leave aside all the detail. I just need a little bit of a move. I'm loath to use the word pivot, because I apparently just completely dislike that through the whole program. But it needed to shift. It needed to move, and it has done so very successfully into the small to medium enterprise, and looking after, taking the same pain, and giving time back to small to medium businesses in terms of accounts payable, receivable, bills. A little bit of the market dictated that, but a fair bit of that came from the agility of the business to be able to go that far. So it's the same thing of what if, it's the same thing of being innovative, it's the same thing of just being agile with where you might take the business, which is easier said than done. I get it. It is easier said than done. If you're in steel manufacturing, or you're really very lean with what you do, it can be tricky. But wherever possible, and the wine industry is a classic case of it, why wouldn't we be more ambitious? Why wouldn't we be able to go and do something with a stack of 100-year-old barrels? Why wouldn't we be able to do some other things? And being agile with that is being prepared. So, back to Onda find myself in a position that never thought George that it would be 18 months ago, probably. It's moved really well.
Fantastic, thank you. Martin, I might go to you if I can. In a marketplace where we might expect to see the natural human reaction of bunkering down and being quite conservative because we're scared and we're uncertain and we don't necessarily know what the future holds, it could be said you've adopted something of a counterintuitive approach to that. And maybe zigged where others are zagging, being creative, being innovative, got on the front foot. Like threw Bruce a curveball with zig and zagging earlier. I apologise for my colloquialisms, but you have elected to invest heavily in expanding your offerings and capabilities. This wonderful facility that we're sitting in tonight is a good example of that, as is the wonderful new fish bank. I'm interested in a couple of things here. why have you elected to kind of put the chips in a little bit more when others are sitting back and being a little conservative? And maybe then the decision-making process that you apply to make a strategic choice like that. Is that sort of gut feel, intuitive, just years of experience, or do you have an actual more formulaic approach?
Wasn't pre-pandemic.
Sorry, what are we doing with Ziggy? With Ziggy. Yeah, okay. So, well, yeah, I think, I mean, it's a multi-layered question, but at the beginning, I mean, I suppose, big picture of what happened for us is a bit of timing and opportunity. I think the timing, and they kind of go together, I guess. So, at the moment, you know, the current economic climate is such that there's a lot of capital floating around that's looking for a home. So then what happens is a company like Duxton Asset Management think, well, okay, where are we going to go? Maybe pubs as an asset class are interesting. Let's go down that path. So then through relationships, one thing and another, they come to us and they say, well, what do you think? We go, well, we actually think there is an opportunity there, partly because, you know, I mean, it has made people cautious, and I think that partly, I mean, obviously, unfortunately, it has put some people under financial duress. But I think the other thing, which probably our recent successes through the Duxton Asset Fund, our recent purchases have really come out of people who weren't under financial duress but decided to exit the industry because COVID actually changed their whole way of thinking. They suddenly went, you know what, I actually enjoyed for 10 or 12 weeks not running this business anymore. And actually, you know what, maybe I've got better and more interesting things to do. And so that actually has probably been the biggest thing for us, is that we want to be in the industry and want to grow, and we're there helping people exit the industry that actually want to exit the industry. So I guess if that makes any sense, that's
Just a regular white knight, just helping those people out.
I'm just doing God's work, that's all I do. Can we move on from that bit now? But that is true. I mean, I think that is actually very interesting. Here is a classic example. The guys here, I mean, these are tightly held assets, these things. At the end of the day, these guys, they just couldn't bring themselves to open the hotel again. They could not do it. They couldn't. There was no reason why they couldn't do it. They were over it. They were done. And that, you know, and then they were very, very good, successful operators here, or, you know, generationally themselves. But at the end of the day, they just couldn't go back. It had gone too far for them. And that's the truth. So, but moving on from that, I guess, just to try and finish that off, I guess there's an element of strategy and intuition. I suppose we look at properties like this and we think, we understand that, we think we can do well there. I guess that's the intuition element of it. But then, you know, of course there is analysis. There's I mean, what are we buying? We're buying a property. There's what is the underlying value of the asset? Are we buying goodwill? What is that really worth? What do we think we can do with it? What can we actually, you know, how much do we need to spend capital on it? And then, obviously, you run the numbers, and does it get over the hurdle or doesn't it? So there's both. Like, the intuition probably brings us to the table, and then from there the analysis takes over.
You played a beautiful straight back to a discombobulating question there, mate. Thank you so much. I think you've done very well. Staying on those sport metaphors, which I use, apologise, Bruce. There are reactive changes that business leaders have to make when, you know, rapid or unforeseen things just kind of present. And then there are proactive changes that brave leaders take when they sense an opportunity, when they see a means to build the health of their enterprise down the track. With regard to growing the community connected to the beautiful name in this town, can you tell us about sort of proactive decision making at Adelaide United and some of the thoughts and things you guys are doing there, just staying on the front foot?
Yeah, look, community is massive for us. So we have, or football has, the highest number of participants of any sport in Australia. But there seems to be a disconnect between, the under 7s and under 10s and under 11 kids that love to run around on the weekend and bumps on seats in the stadium on the weekend as well. So there's a number of factors to that. Part of it is we play the professional game in summer, all the juniors play through winter, so you've got a bit of a disconnect there. But engaging with our community is huge. The multicultural and diverse backgrounds, whatever you want to call it, new arrivals is a massive target market for us. Not in the sense that let's go here to this school and hope that these guys all become members. That's not the motive. But it's more about let's go there and make sure that all these kids start to build an affinity with the club. Because over time, they will become more and more invested, and then maybe, in 3, 4, 5, 10 years, they may become a member. I think it's a long road. Our digital strategy was really key come COVID, because there was so many restrictions. Players couldn't go to schools, players couldn't go anywhere. You had to operate in this bubble, so you had a complete disconnect with the broader community. A lot of our fans from a younger demographic. It's a little bit different to cricket. You go to soccer dinners, and it's not the complete opposite. So it's a bit of a younger demographic, so they're in tune with your Instagrams, they're in tune with your Facebook, your social medias. So a lot of the players did get online and start to interact with the fans. And even people who aren't fans, just to have that exposure, I think is really important. So in terms of engaging with the community, we've also done a lot of work in racism, and we did it before the Collingwood stuff all came out. And it's not about, do we have a racist workplace, or does our women's team feel as valued as our men's team? We have a women's team as well. But it's just about everyone feeling important, and as an Adelaide United footballer or staff member, having the requisite social skills to be able to deal with what some of the challenges have been, especially throughout 2020, right? So I think with that social element, with the digital element, helps us to engage with the community. And you speak about racism, people think black and white straight away, but it just shows how quickly the world changes. I can tell you now, my WhatsApp is blown up with racist Chinese bat-eating stuff like in February, and then George Floyd got killed and it was all black and white. Like, it just moves so quickly, but it's just about, managing the social, I don't say difficulties, but let's say the intricacies, the nuances, and how our players and our staff carry themselves, not just in the workplace, but also outside in social settings.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Stephen, whether it's in wine or whether it's in financial services, maybe there's a generalisation we can hold to for a moment that healthy businesses tend to exist in healthy sectors. And I'm interested in the dichotomy of leadership in 2021 between being the leader of your organisation in a competitive space, and we want to get ahead, we want to be successful ahead of others in our space. But to do that, we know we need to nurture the health of the greater marketplace, which means kind of giving competitors a leg up. How do you as a leader in 2021 wrestle with that sort of that duality, supporting or leading the growth of the future health of a precinct, but still making sure your eye stays on the prize of your organisation?
Look, it's easily said, but I genuinely believe in a collaborative capitalism approach to it. And I spent a lot of time with pros, and this might sound really weird, but we work really closely with Port Adelaide. And at first blush, you go, that can't be so, but actually worked very closely with them on developing crowds, on building Adelaide Oval, on the promotion of the game, on common issues for South Australia at the AFL level, etc. We actually work really closely, and we didn't get nothing on their guys. They come showdown though, this is the biggest nominee you guys want to win more than anything in the whole world, but there is a collaborative approach to it to get the best that you can for your organisation. Onda, for example, Onda work with the business SA partner trying to get to this, which is a little bit different. I get it. And the other example that brings me to mind, Sean, is that we're working really hard trying to get more water to the Ross Valley. Now, we're leading the charge of that with a couple of our comrades. That will benefit everybody in the Ross Valley. And you look at the first blush and go, well, why would you do that for everybody else? You know, spend your time and your money on that. Actually, it's better for everybody if that happens, including us. So if we can get everyone on the same page with that, and go and state government, it might actually get some impetus for everybody to win. So I think, I honestly think this way. As it was in Britain, work together, but back yourself to be better than everybody else is going to do. Neil Craig had a great expression of this. They can copy us all they like, we'll just do it better. In terms of the way we play, what we do, and so forth. And it's always stuck with me. Work together, be collaborative with others for the mutual benefit of the rising tide, but just quietly, we'll do it better than anybody else. We'll try and be one step ahead.
Nice. Good thinking and applicable across all sectors. Marty, while everyone in this room who's either holding a drink or has finished their drink is looking forward to the next one, all getting ready to enjoy a beautiful meal here, is super grateful that our pubs and restaurants are open for business. I think it's fair to say 2020 broke or certainly remodeled some of the consumer thinking and behaviour paradigms that we might have had previously. From a hospitality business leader's perspective, how are you sort of balancing that sort of sense of return to normal, back to our knitting, giving people the flavours that they've been used to and loved, with staying on the front foot and continuing to push the bar and innovate? How are you reconciling those two things?
Yeah, well, that's a big challenge, and I think you know, Nikki covered that off partially earlier. I mean, the new norm, getting back to normal. In our industry, I don't think it will it'll never be what it was before, and I think actually that's progress. I think that's actually a good thing. So that getting the hub of the question is that would be the big takeout. If I go back a step, I mean, we went from being shut down to sitting down only to consume alcohol to when are we going to be able to get back to the pub, then when are we going to be able to stand up to drink, you know, and now we're going through when are we going to be able to dance, you know, so we're still moving through that. But I guess we've learned a lot along the way. I mean, booking, you know, pubs were very impulsive things, in the sense of a bunch of guys might go, okay, let's go down to the pub and have a few pints on Saturday afternoon. And that was it through their thought process. Nowadays, those guys will ring the pub and say, hey, we want to come down, can we reserve a spot? So now we don't just reserve our restaurants, we reserve everything. And that's a great thing, because that's allowed us to connect. You know, we're creating a much stronger connection with our customer base than we ever have been able to before. So whichever direction we go, these things that have come out of all of this, and just the two sittings and the way we've handled food operations, I mean, we've just made them so much more efficient, and in the long run, as we get busier again, they'll become more profitable because of these things. So the big takeout for that, for me, is let's make sure that we take the lessons and take them forward, make the most of them, and make sure we don't fall back into our bad habits that we definitely had a lot of before.
Sure. Don't waste what came from last year. Nikki, last long-form question for you before I get you all to wrap it up with, I suppose, some take-out thoughts. For this crowd of leaders in South Australia, let's talk about people. We've talked about people sitting on the couch and not wanting to get off the couch until there's sufficient motivation and incentive to get off the couch. But I suppose the reality is finding, recruiting and retaining great staff. Those people who will enable and create amazing customer experiences. The vehicle that we will use as organisations, whatever sector that we're in, to grow healthy businesses in the future. Never been more important than ever, never been perhaps more challenging than ever. What do businesses need to be thinking about and acting upon in 2021 when it comes to finding, onboarding and holding tight to great staff?
Well, I'm a massive believer in diversity. I dislike quotas immensely, and that doesn't please a lot of women, because I want people to think about the benefit of diversity. I'm not just talking about gender, I'm talking about ethnicity, I'm talking about age. Because I will hire young and old, I'll hire mums because of the benefit that they bring to our business. And I know that when they come to work and they're there for that period of time when their child's in school, they're absolutely focused. So I think that diversity and thinking about that in your workplace and at a board level is incredibly important, and there are huge benefits for it. So then when you think about that, hiring a millennial is very different to hiring a 55-year-old person, and understanding what you want and who's going to be the best person to deliver that, because the millennials are very different. No one's going to get a gold watch from a millennial. They'll be lucky to be staying 18 months, 2 years, they've done their service and they're out. So that sort of notion, and a lot of things also, it's really good research I've read recently, it's pre-pandemic, but it's still really, really relevant. And it was around, social enterprises. And so the millennials will come for an interview now, and they will say, well, what's your social enterprise? What are you doing? What's your environmental policies here? And they will start to put them back on you. And we can say what we want about Gen X's and Gen Y's and millennials, and you can whinge about them, you can say all you like. However, if you embrace them, if you look at that technology that you talked about earlier, and embrace that and engage them, you can get a lot more out of them. So for me, it's diversity, but it's understanding out of each of those different sort of areas of genetics, ethnicity, and age, demographic breakdown, what you're going to need to do to be able to target them within your workplace to retain them, because it's very, very different.
Terrific. Thank you very much. There is a veritable gold mine that's come from the answers that you all generously unpacked in a pretty tight space of time. I'm going to go around the grounds if I can and ask you maybe to wrap the conversation up. We're sitting here talking to a group of business leaders who are from diverse sectors, who, like all of you, have navigated a challenging year, but we're sitting here talking about thriving in 2021 and beyond. As leaders of businesses, as people who have to bring confidence to our businesses, to get things not just back on their feet, back to the old normal, but to better, what do you suggest they be obsessed with in the year ahead? What's your one takeout and you think, please, get down and dirty and focused on this, and I think, based on my learnings from the year just gone, that's going to serve you well. Can I start with you, Mark?
In a micro sense, I guess, a bit about what I talked about before, that there's this ability now for us to get a lot closer to our consumers, and I think that means that we've got to get right in front of the IT train straight away. I mean, when I see an 80-year-old guy going to the races, not that I go to the races very often, and QR code in, and he doesn't even blink, he knows exactly what he's doing, then if that's not an opportunity, then I'll go here for change, because I think that's a big thing. In the macro sense, I guess it's about, again, I'm repeating myself, sorry, but probably the things that we've learned along the way that have made us better, let's make sure that we make the most of those as well. I think, and probably expect the unexpected. I think a bit about the strategic planning, really try to. I've got one more actually, and also broadening your horizons, because I do think that the optics are on Adelaide and South Australia quite a bit as well. So I think from a business sense, we want to really think about that and how that potentially can impact us.
Fantastic. Steve?
Well, knowing the question was coming gave rise to actually having to have a really good think about it and the best way to answer it. And funnily enough, I came up with one word I've used already, which is agility, and the other is resilience. And of course, dead easy to say that. And then, funnily enough, I was reading a Treasury Wine States thing this afternoon with Tim Ford, their CEO, as well. Agility and resilience are the key things for Treasury. I thought that's spooky. But just to structure a little bit in terms of what I mean, because it can be just a word, right? The agility one we talked about, resilience in terms of an organisation is in my mind at the moment, both for Onda and for Randall Wine Group, was as well. In the last few years, my last few years in the AFL, there was so much time and effort put into giving players the tools to be resilient. Okay? So much time and effort. How to handle the knockbacks, how to handle it physically, emotionally, so much in terms of support mechanisms, some would describe it as overs in terms of that support, but how do we give, what tools do we give athletes individually to be able to handle adversity? The overlay of the organisational set, for me, with us, at 130 odd staff, is how can I give them the tools, both individually and for us as a group, to be resilient for the next time one of these kicks in the guts come along. And I think it is giving people the tools, in an organisational sense and individually, to be able to handle that. How would we be better off next time? Shouldn't we be better off next time? If one of these major hits comes, that what calmly, quietly, we've got another plan, we've got plan B, C, and D, and as an organisation, we've got some tools to be able to handle it. I think there's an overlay there that can work.
Absolutely. True. Thank you, Bruce.
I think operationally, I think it's the digitisation of everything. I think you can do things leaner and meaner. That's a benefit to your organisation and it future-proofs any future kick in the guts or whatever you want to call it, like SWAT events. And I think on your traditional leadership sort of side, I think it's confronting, having tough conversations early, but being empathetic. And that comes back to what Nikki said around diversity. I've got 2 kids, but I'm telling you, I could not deal with someone who's pregnant and who thinks they should be working from home and someone wants me in the office or something. That's not my game. I'm not built like that. But if there's women around the boardroom, if there's women on the senior management team, then that helps. So we really have empathetic conversations and tough conversations. People put off tough conversations. We had to stand all our players down, and with myself and the CEO making all those calls. And as you can imagine, 28-year-old child and mortgage is $400,000 a year, spending $3,000 a month, and saying, hey, well, how long is this going to last? I don't know. Saying the world's ending. When's the season coming back? Fox Sports just looked up the TV deal. What's happening? And you've got no answers for it. But it's about embracing those tough conversations. I think as a leader, it's your responsibility to have those, but do it in an empathetic way.
Thank you.
What they said, plus buy local, buy local, buy local. Your wines, your beers, your gins, all of those things. Buy to get to the fringe, get to the city, go to Fishbank 2KW, go to the restaurants, stay a night, take a mini break in the city because they really need it. But most importantly, every time you buy a product, if there's something local, South Australian, God, we need it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you please thank our very generous panel. I'll now hand over to George.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you to the panel. Fantastic. Insightful. At Onda, we get to work with some amazing people. We've got some of our business clients here tonight. So, Greg, Taylor and Holmes, thank you. We love you. Adam, Prohibition Gin. So one of the gifts we're going to do to the panel shortly is from Prohibition. So hope you all enjoy this. We also get to work with lifestyle, we call them, or individual clients or families. And Andrew Downs, just put your hand up, Andrew, is one of those. I love working with smart people. It's just fantastic. I love it. And when you've got someone like Adam with Prohibition, who makes some of the best country's gin, if not the best, and then Andrew Downs, who comes to me and says, "Have you got any mates that make gin? Because I've got this idea of a fundraiser, because my mate's got this horrible melanoma, and I want to raise money for Flinders Foundation." Win-win. So Andrew, well done. We got it to the marketplace. Anyone that wants to buy a gin, please go to Prohibition Gin. It's barbecue, Bob's gin, and please, it's $50 from every sale goes to the Flinders Foundation. So Andrew, Adam, well done. David from Stellan, I'll get you to come up.
know we're all pretty keen to get stuck in the bar and have a few coffees, so I'll keep this short. On behalf of Tom Hicks and Brad Simon, our partners, we're really the new kids on the block. We're an old business trading under a new banner. So we've clocked over our first year, and it's just absolutely awesome to be invited to join James and George on such a great event. Thank you all. I know you all personally for being so transparent and open about 2020. What a year. Thank God it's over, but it feels like we're still in it. And also thank you, a lot of friends in the room, so thank you for supporting us, and look forward to catching up with you all the backside of the room. Thanks.